My name is Melanie, and at 34, I thought I had it all figured out. A successful career as a financial analyst, a beautiful home, and a loving marriage to Derek. Then his parents Harold and Geraldine moved in with us, along with his 30-year-old brother Paul. It was supposed to be temporary. 9 months later, when I finally asked when they planned to leave, my entire world collapsed around me. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. If you have ever trusted someone completely only to have that trust shattered, then you know the pain I felt that day. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and hit that like and subscribe button to join me on this journey of heartbreak and healing. Derek and I met during our junior year at university. We were introduced by mutual friends at a campus fundraiser for local animal shelters. I remember being instantly drawn to his warm smile and kind eyes. He was studying business management while I was pursuing finance. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant just off campus. We talked for hours, discovering our shared love for travel, hiking, and old movies. By the end of the night, I felt like I had known him forever. Our relationship progressed naturally. We dated for 4 years before he proposed during a weekend trip to the mountains. It was a perfect moment, just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I said yes without hesitation. We married a year later in a modest ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. The first 7 years of our marriage were mostly happy. Like any couple. We had our disagreements, but we always managed to work through them. Derek worked as a marketing manager for a mid-sized company, while I climbed the corporate ladder at a financial firm. We were both ambitious and supported each other's career goals. My salary was significantly higher than Derek's, but it never seemed to be an issue between us. We were a team, or so I thought. 3 years before everything fell apart, we purchased our dream home. It was a spacious 4-bedroom house in a beautiful neighborhood with excellent schools. The house needed some work, but it had potential. We spent weekends painting walls, replacing fixtures, and landscaping the yard. It felt like we were building our future together, brick by brick. I contributed about 70% of the down payment and paid the majority of our mortgage payments. This was a practical arrangement based on our income difference, and Derek seemed comfortable with it. Before the in-laws moved in, we only saw them during holidays and special occasions. Harold was a tall, imposing man with strong opinions about everything. He had worked as a bank manager until his retirement 5 years earlier. He was traditional in his views, especially regarding gender roles. He often made comments about how a woman's place was in the home, thinly veiled as jokes that made me uncomfortable. Geraldine was his polar opposite, a petite woman who rarely spoke up. She seemed to exist in Harold's shadow, always deferring to his judgment. Their dynamic made me uneasy, but I kept my thoughts to myself out of respect for Derek. Derek's relationship with his parents, particularly his father, was complicated. He constantly sought Harold's approval, changing his opinions and preferences to align with his father's. I noticed how Derek would confidently express a viewpoint to me, then completely reverse it when speaking to Harold. This pattern concerned me, but whenever I gently brought it up, Derek would become defensive. He claimed I was overanalyzing things, that I didn't understand the special bond between father and son. Then there was Paul, Derek's younger brother. At 30, Paul still lived with his parents and had never held a job for more than a few months. He had dropped out of college after his first year and spent most of his time playing video games or hanging out with friends. Harold and Geraldine enabled his behavior, making excuses for his lack of ambition and responsibility. Derek often expressed frustration with his brother's lifestyle, but never confronted his parents about it. 9 months before our final confrontation, Derek received a call from his father. I could tell something was wrong by Derek's expression as he listened. When he hung up, he explained that his parents had lost their home due to financial difficulties. Harold had made some poor investment decisions, and they could no longer afford their mortgage payments. The bank was foreclosing on their house. They needed a place to stay, just for a few weeks, until they could find an affordable apartment. I had immediate reservations. Our home was our sanctuary, and I valued our privacy. But I also understood the importance of family support during difficult times. After a long discussion, I agreed they could stay with us temporarily. I emphasized the temporary nature of the arrangement, and Derek assured me it would only be for a short period. What I didn't realize was that Paul would be joining them. This detail was conveniently omitted until the day they arrived with their belongings, including Paul's extensive gaming equipment. I remember standing in our driveway, watching as they unloaded far more possessions than seemed necessary for a brief stay. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. These were my husband's parents, and they needed help. I would be patient and supportive, for Derek's sake. Little did I know that my kindness would be taken advantage of in ways I could never have anticipated. As I helped Geraldine unpack some kitchen items, she mentioned how wonderful it would be for Derek to have his family close again. The way she said it, with a certain gleam in her eye, should have been my first warning. But I smiled and nodded, telling myself that everything would be fine. We had a strong marriage. A few weeks with extended family wouldn't change that. How wrong I was. The first few weeks were awkward but manageable. Everyone was on their best behavior, mindful of personal space and routines. Harold and Geraldine took the guest bedroom, while Paul settled into our home office with an air mattress. I rearranged my work materials to a corner of our bedroom, not ideal but workable for what I believed would be a short time. I noticed the first warning signs around week 3. I came home from work to find the living room furniture completely rearranged. The couch that used to face our beautiful garden view now pointed toward the television, which had been moved to a different wall. When I asked Derek about it, he shrugged and said his father thought this layout made more sense for family gatherings. I bit my tongue, reminding myself this was temporary. The kitchen was the next battleground. Geraldine gradually took over, reorganizing cabinets and drawers to her liking. My carefully curated collection of spices was pushed aside to make room for her processed food mixes. My ceramic cookware, a splurge I had justified by promising to cook more at home, was relegated to the back of cupboards in favor of Harold and Geraldine's old Teflon pans. When I mentioned this to Geraldine, she patted my hand condescendingly and said, "Darling, when you have been cooking as long as I have, you will understand the right way to organize a kitchen." Paul's entitlement grew more apparent with each passing day. Despite having a designated space in the office, he spread his belongings throughout the house. I found his dirty socks in the living room, empty soda cans on side tables, and gaming equipment hooked up to the main television. The final straw came when I discovered he had been using my laptop without permission. When confronted, he simply said he thought family shared everything. Family dinners became increasingly uncomfortable. Harold dominated conversations, often cutting me off mid-sentence. They discussed family memories and inside jokes that excluded me. Derek, instead of including me in the conversation, fell into old family dynamics, laughing at his father's inappropriate jokes and ignoring my attempts to contribute. I felt like a stranger in my own home. As weeks turned into months, the temporary arrangement began looking suspiciously permanent. Whenever I cautiously brought up the topic of their housing search, Harold would vaguely mention that the market was tough or that they were waiting for the right opportunity. Geraldine would quickly change the subject, usually to something Derek had accomplished as a child. I noticed they never mentioned actual apartments they had viewed or applications they had submitted. Derek's behavior underwent a subtle but significant transformation. He started coming home later from work, often grabbing dinner with his father instead of with me. When I expressed concerns about our living situation, he would dismiss them as petty complaints. "They are family, Melanie. We need to support them." His tone implied I was being selfish for wanting my home back. Work became my sanctuary. I started leaving earlier in the morning and returning later in the evening. My colleague, Amanda, noticed the change in my demeanor and invited me for coffee. As I shared my situation, the reality of what was happening became clearer. Amanda pointed out what I had been reluctant to admit. This was no longer a temporary situation. My in-laws were settling in for the long haul, and Derek was enabling them. The financial strain added another layer of stress. Our utility bills tripled with 3 additional adults in the house. Groceries disappeared at an alarming rate, with Paul seemingly eating at all hours of the day. Harold watched premium cable channels, running up our bill with sports packages and movie rentals. Yet when I suggested they contribute to household expenses, Derek accused me of being materialistic and uncaring. In a desperate attempt to regain some control, I created a set of house rules. Simple things like cleaning up after yourself, respecting quiet hours, and contributing to chores. I printed copies and placed them on the refrigerator. The next day, the paper was gone. When I asked about it, Harold laughed and said, "We are too old to live by someone else's rules, dear." I tried planning family activities, hoping to build a more positive relationship with my in-laws. I bought tickets to a local theater production, knowing Geraldine enjoyed plays. On the scheduled evening, Harold announced he would rather watch a football game, and Geraldine dutifully stayed home with him. Derek didn't even suggest they honor the commitment I had made. Instead, he invited Paul to join us, who spent the entire performance checking his phone and sighing loudly. As the 6-month mark approached, I found myself retreating emotionally and physically. I took longer showers just to have a few minutes of privacy. I volunteered for business trips I would have previously declined. I stopped inviting friends over, embarrassed by the tension in our home and the perpetual mess created by Paul. My breaking point was approaching, though I didn't recognize it yet. I still believed I could manage the situation, that Derek would eventually see how unhealthy the arrangement had become. I clung to the hope that my marriage was strong enough to survive this temporary challenge. But it wasn't temporary. One evening, as I was working late in our bedroom, I overheard Harold talking to Geraldine in the hallway. "We don't need to waste time looking at apartments," he said in a low voice. "Derek agrees this arrangement is working perfectly. Besides, why should we struggle to pay rent when we can live here for free?" In that moment, the last of my illusions shattered. This was never meant to be temporary. They had no intention of leaving. And somehow, Derek was complicit in this plan. I sat frozen at my desk, my heart pounding as I realized the magnitude of the betrayal. My home, my marriage, my sense of security were all being systematically dismantled. And the people I should have been able to trust were orchestrating it. Something had to change. I couldn't continue living like this. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come. 9 months into what was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, I barely recognized my life. My mental health had deteriorated significantly. I had trouble sleeping, often lying awake listening to Paul playing video games well past midnight. I lost weight as my appetite diminished. The constant tension gave me persistent headaches. Friends commented on how tired I looked, how the spark in my eyes had dimmed. The truth about my in-laws' intentions became undeniable when I discovered a stack of mail addressed to Harold while cleaning. Among the envelopes was a letter from a realtor they had consulted 3 months earlier. Curiosity and suspicion prompted me to read it. The contents confirmed my worst fears. They had explicitly told the realtor they were no longer interested in viewing properties because they had made permanent living arrangements with family. Another document showed they had formally changed their mailing address to our home. They had never intended to move out. From the beginning, this had been their plan. The temporary nature of the arrangement had been a lie to get their foot in the door. A few days later, I overheard a conversation between Harold and Geraldine that removed any lingering doubt. I had come home early from work due to a migraine and was resting in our bedroom with the door slightly ajar. They were in the guest room across the hall, speaking in what they thought were hushed tones. "I think Melanie is getting restless with us being here," Geraldine said, a rare moment of perceptiveness from her. Harold scoffed. "This is Derek's house too, and he wants us here. He has always been a good son who understands family loyalty. If she can't accept that, then perhaps she's not the right wife for him." "But she did agree to let us stay temporarily," Geraldine pointed out timidly. "Temporarily, permanently, what's the difference? We're family. Besides, Derek mentioned they're doing well financially, especially with her job. They can afford to support us. We raised him, after all. He owes us. Their casual entitlement to my home and resources left me breathless with anger. But the implication that Derek was fully aware and supportive of their plan hurt even more deeply. Had my husband been plotting against me all along? The final straw came the following weekend. I had been keeping important work documents in a locked drawer in our bedroom, along with some personal items, including my grandmother's jewelry. When I went to retrieve a necklace for a dinner with colleagues, I found the drawer partially open. The documents were disorganized, and a pair of earrings was missing. I confronted Paul, suspecting he was the culprit. He denied everything, but his shifty gaze told me otherwise. When I insisted on searching his room, Harold stepped in, accusing me of treating his son like a criminal. Derek, instead of supporting me, suggested I might have misplaced the earrings. The united front they presented made one thing clear: it was them against me in my own home. That evening, I sat in my car in the office parking lot long after everyone else had left. Tears streamed down my face as I finally acknowledged the reality of my situation. My marriage was crumbling under the weight of my in-laws' presence, and Derek had chosen his family of origin over the family we had built together. I called Amanda, the only person who truly understood what I had been going through. She listened as I poured out my frustrations and fears. "Melanie, this isn't sustainable," she said gently. "You're being pushed out of your own home. You need to take a stand." "But how?" "Every time I try to discuss it, they gang up on me. Derek doesn't even see the problem." "Then make him see it. Be direct. Tell him exactly how this is affecting you and that something needs to change immediately. Set a deadline for his parents to move out." Amanda's advice made sense. I had been tiptoeing around the issue, trying to be understanding and accommodating. Perhaps it was time for a more direct approach. I decided to have a serious conversation with Derek alone, away from his parents' influence. I spent the next day planning what I would say. I rehearsed my points, determined to remain calm and rational. This wasn't about attacking his family. It was about reclaiming our marriage and our home. I would appeal to his love for me, remind him of the life we had built together before his family arrived. On Saturday morning, I suggested to Derek that we go for a drive, something we used to enjoy doing together. To my surprise, he agreed. As we drove along the coast, I carefully broached the subject. "Derek, we need to talk about your family's living situation," I began, keeping my voice steady. He immediately tensed. "What about it?" "It's been 9 months since they moved in. That's much longer than the few weeks we originally agreed to." "They're still getting back on their feet," he said defensively. "The housing market is tough right now." "Have they been actively looking for a place?" "Because I found a letter from a realtor suggesting otherwise." His knuckles whitened as he gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You went through their mail?" "That's invasion of privacy, Melanie." I noticed how he deflected the actual issue. The letter was sitting out in the open. But that's not the point. The point is they've changed their mailing address to our house. They're acting like this is a permanent arrangement. "Would that be so terrible?" he asked, his tone challenging. "Their family." I took a deep breath. "Yes, they're your family, and I respect that. But we are also a family, you and I. Our home was our space. Since they moved in, everything has changed. You've changed." "What is that supposed to mean?" His voice had an edge to it now. "You dismiss my concerns. You side with them in every disagreement. It feels like I'm outnumbered in my own home." I paused, gathering courage for my next words. "I think we need to set a deadline. 1 month for them to find alternative housing." The car jerked as Derek abruptly pulled over to the side of the road. He turned to face me, his expression harder than I had ever seen it. "You want to throw my parents out on the street? After everything they've done for me? For us?" "That's not what I'm saying." I tried to explain. "I just think it's time they found their own place. This was never meant to be permanent. They're staying, Melanie. End of discussion." The finality in his tone sent a chill through me. In that moment, I realized we weren't having a discussion. He was issuing an ultimatum. and I was expected to fall in line. We drove home in silence, the distance between us spanning far more than the inches separating us in the car. I knew the confrontation I had been dreading was inevitable now. What I didn't know was how completely it would shatter the life I thought I had. The tension from our drive followed us home like a storm cloud. Derek disappeared into the garage, tinkering with tools to avoid further conversation. I retreated to our bedroom, my mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. The house felt suffocating. Every room occupied by people who had overstayed their welcome by months. That evening, I decided to make one final attempt at a reasonable discussion. If Derek and I could present a united front to his parents, perhaps they would understand the strain their extended stay was placing on our marriage. I approached him in the kitchen while he was grabbing a beer from the refrigerator. "Can we talk?" I asked quietly, conscious of Harold watching television in the adjacent living room. Derek sighed. "If this is about my parents again." "It is, but please hear me out. I'm not asking them to leave immediately. I'm just suggesting we discuss a timeline. 3 more months, maybe. To give them plenty of time to find something suitable." He twisted the bottle cap off with unnecessary force. "You just don't understand family loyalty, do you? This isn't about loyalty." I countered, struggling to keep my voice low. "It's about boundaries. It's about our marriage. Our marriage is fine. The only problem is your attitude toward my family." His dismissiveness ignited something in me. Months of suppressed frustration bubbled to the surface. "Our marriage is not fine, Derek. We barely talk anymore. You side with your father over me on everything. And have you even noticed the financial strain? Our savings are being depleted because we're supporting 3 additional adults." Derek's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about? We're doing fine financially." "No, we're not. The utilities have tripled. The grocery bill has quadrupled. And I've noticed money missing from our joint account. Large withdrawals I didn't make." A flicker of guilt crossed his face before being replaced by defiance. "I've been helping my parents with some expenses. They need it right now. You've been giving them our money without discussing it with me?" The betrayal cut deep. "How much, Derek? How much of our savings have you given them?" He looked away. "They're family. They needed help." "How much?" I insisted. "About 15,000, he finally admitted. The room seemed to spin around me. $15,000. Money we had been saving for our future, for the family we had talked about starting. And he had given it away without a single conversation with me. "That's our money," I said, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. "Money we both contributed to. You had no right to make that decision unilaterally." "It's my money too," he shot back. "Actually, most of it was mine. I contribute 70% to our household, remember? Or has that fact become inconvenient now that you're playing the generous son?" The kitchen door swung open, and Harold stepped in, his imposing figure filling the doorway. "Is everything all right?" We could hear raised voices. "Everything's fine, Dad," Derek said quickly. "No, everything is not fine," I countered, beyond caring who heard at this point. "Derek just admitted to giving you $15,000 from our savings without discussing it with me." Harold's expression darkened. "That money was a loan to help us get back on our feet." "Are you suggesting my son shouldn't help his parents in their time of need?" "I'm suggesting that financial decisions in our marriage should be made together. And I'm stating, not suggesting, that after 9 months, it's time for you to find your own place to live." Geraldine appeared behind Harold, her face pinched with anxiety. "What's happening?" "Melanie thinks we've overstayed our welcome," Harold informed her, his tone making it clear how ridiculous he found the notion. "This was supposed to be temporary," I reminded them. "A few weeks. That's what we agreed to. It's been 9 months. Plans change," Harold said dismissively. "Family adapts." "Not like this," I insisted. "Not with one person bearing all the sacrifices while everyone else benefits." Derek stepped between me and his parents. "You're overreacting. They've nowhere else to go right now. Because they haven't looked. They changed their mailing address to our house months ago. They told their realtor they had made permanent living arrangements. They never intended to leave, Derek. And you knew it. The accusation hung in the air between us. Derek's silence confirmed what I had suspected but had been too afraid to acknowledge. He had known all along. The betrayal left me breathless. "Is this true?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Did you know they were planning to stay permanently?" Derek's gaze dropped to the floor, then lifted to meet his father's eyes, as if seeking permission or guidance. "Tell her, son," Harold said firmly. Derek turned to me, his expression hardening. "Yes, I knew. We discussed it a few months ago. They're comfortable here. We have the space. It makes sense for them to stay. And you didn't think to include me in that decision? About who lives in our home?" "I knew you would react like this," he said, gesturing toward me as if my response justified his deception. "Like what? Like someone whose trust has been completely violated? Like someone who suddenly realizes her husband has been plotting behind her back?" "You're being dramatic," Derek said coldly. "This is about family." "My family? I thought I was your family too," I said, fighting back tears. Harold stepped forward. "Perhaps if you understood the meaning of family, this wouldn't be an issue. Derek was raised to value loyalty and duty, and I was raised to value honesty and respect," I countered. "Neither of which I'm receiving right now." Derek ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Look, this isn't productive. They're staying, Melanie. That's the reality. If you can't accept that, then maybe." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. An ultimatum was coming. "Maybe what?" I pressed, needing to hear him say it. "Maybe you should be the one to go." The words hit me like a physical blow. 5 simple words that shattered everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about Derek, about the life we had built together. Before I could respond, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Paul appeared in the doorway, his expression a mixture of smugness and satisfaction. "Finally," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Took you long enough to figure it out, bro?" "Figure what out?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Paul smirked. "That we're here to stay. Mom and Dad lost their house because Dad has been helping Derek with the mortgage for years. Did you really think his salary covered his half? Now it's payback time. Family looks after family." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Derek had been receiving financial help from his parents all along, hiding the truth about his contributions to our household. Now that they needed help, he was choosing them over me. Over us. I looked at each face in the kitchen, Harold's smug satisfaction, Geraldine's guilty avoidance, Paul's open contempt, and worst of all, Derek's cold detachment. In that moment, I knew our marriage was over. The man I had loved, the life I had built, had been based on lies. "I see," I said quietly, a strange calm settling over me. "Well then, I guess I know where I stand." I walked past them, ignoring Derek calling my name as an afterthought. In our bedroom, I closed the door and leaned against it, allowing myself a moment of grief for the marriage I had thought was real. Then, with a deep breath, I began to plan my next steps. The house had fallen silent by the time I emerged from the bedroom hours later. I made my way to the kitchen for a glass of water, my mind made up. As I stood at the sink, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me seemed different somehow. Sadder, yes, but also stronger. Ready for what came next. I knew what I had to do. 3 months before the final confrontation, I had begun to notice troubling patterns in our finances. Bills were piling up despite my regular contributions to our joint account. Credit card statements showed purchases at stores I never frequented. When I casually mentioned these discrepancies to Derek, he brushed them off, attributing them to inflation or forgetting to tell me about certain expenses. My professional background in finance made me naturally attentive to numbers, and something wasn't adding up. One evening while Derek was out with his father, I sat down with our financial records and began a thorough review. What I discovered sent a chill through me. Derek had been making large withdrawals, sometimes thousands of dollars at a time, with no corresponding expenses I could identify. Our savings account, which had once held enough for a comfortable emergency fund, had dwindled significantly. Initially, I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. Perhaps he was planning a surprise vacation or investing in something he planned to tell me about later. But as I dug deeper, I found evidence of financial struggles dating back years. Partial mortgage payments, late fees, credit card balances transferred between accounts to avoid paying them off. The most disturbing discovery was a series of transfers from an account I didn't recognize into our joint account, always just before major expenses like our mortgage payment. When I traced the account number, I found it belonged to Harold and Geraldine. They had been subsidizing Derek's portion of our expenses for years, while he maintained the illusion of contributing equally to our household. This revelation shook me to my core. It wasn't just about the money, though that was concerning enough. It was about the deception, the carefully constructed facade. For years, I had believed we were equals in our partnership, making decisions together based on shared values and goals. Now I questioned everything. I needed to protect myself. Not because I was planning to leave not yet, but because I needed to feel secure while I figured out my next steps. The following day, I contacted an attorney specializing in family law, Jennifer Lawson. I explained my situation, emphasizing that I wasn't immediately seeking divorce, but wanted to understand my options. Based on what you've told me, Jennifer said after listening patiently, I would recommend taking some precautionary measures. Not with the intention of being vindictive, but to protect your interests while you decide how to proceed. She advised me to open a separate bank account in my name only and to begin redirecting my paychecks there. She also suggested documenting all household expenses I covered and gathering evidence of my contributions to the mortgage and home improvements. What about the house? I asked. I paid most of the down payment and the majority of the mortgage. That complicates things, she admitted. In a community property state, the house would typically be considered joint property regardless of uneven contributions. However, if you can document your disproportionate financial input, it strengthens your position in any future property division. Following her advice, I began quietly preparing. I opened a new account at a different bank and arranged for a portion of my salary to be deposited there, leaving enough in our joint account to cover my share of expenses. I gathered financial records, property documents, and evidence of my contributions to our home. But the most significant step I took was installing a small safe in our bedroom closet. I chose a spot behind my winter clothes, somewhere Derek rarely looked. The safe was bolted to the wall and floor, not easily removed. Inside, I placed copies of important documents. Our property deed, mortgage statements, bank records showing my contributions, and my grandmother's jewelry that held both sentimental and monetary value. I also placed a significant amount of cash in the safe, accumulated gradually so as not to raise suspicion. $5,000 that could sustain me if I ever needed to leave quickly. An emergency fund that was mine alone. The safe installation was my insurance policy. Not an admission that my marriage was over, but an acknowledgement that I needed to protect myself while navigating the uncertain terrain ahead. I didn't tell Derek about the safe. Something told me it was better to keep this particular secret. As tensions escalated with his family's extended stay, I added more items to the safe, a journal documenting incidents of financial deceit and boundary violations, a flash drive containing scanned copies of all important documents and photographs of the home in its original state before his family's arrival. I had hoped I would never need these precautions. That Derek would eventually see how his family was damaging our relationship. That we would find our way back to each other. But as weeks turned into months, as his behavior grew more distant and dismissive, I began to accept that hope might not be enough. On the night of our final confrontation, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in our darkened bedroom. Derek had chosen to sleep in the guest room, a clear statement of where his loyalties lay. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of Paul's video game from down the hall. I waited until midnight, ensuring everyone was asleep. Then I quietly packed a suitcase with essential clothing, toiletries, and personal items. I wrote a brief note to Derek, not explaining where I was going, just stating that I needed space to think. I placed my wedding ring on top of the note. Before leaving, I opened the closet and pushed aside my winter clothes, revealing the safe. I entered the code and retrieved my emergency cash, important documents, and irreplaceable jewelry. I also took the journal and flash drive, not wanting to leave any evidence of my preparations. As I closed the safe, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could leave it empty, or I could leave something for Derek to find when he eventually discovered the safe's existence. After a moment's consideration, I placed a single document inside. A copy of our original agreement with his parents, stating they would stay for a few weeks, with both Derek's and my signatures clearly visible. A reminder of promises broken and trust betrayed. I closed the safe, knowing its discovery would be inevitable once they realized I had taken my important documents. What they wouldn't know is that I had already consulted with an attorney, that I had copies of all financial records showing Derek's deception, that I was prepared for whatever came next. As I quietly wheeled my suitcase toward the front door, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The life I had carefully built was crumbling around me, but for the first time in months, I was taking control of my own fate. I took one last look at the house that had once been my home, now filled with people who had systematically pushed me out. Then I stepped outside into the cool night air, closing the door softly behind me. My future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I would no longer be a guest in my own life. Driving away from my home in the middle of the night was surreal. Streetlights cast long shadows across the empty roads as I made my way to Amanda's house. We had arranged everything earlier that day through text messages, careful to delete the conversation afterward in case Derek checked my phone. Amanda had immediately offered her spare bedroom for as long as I needed it. "You're doing the right thing," she assured me as she helped carry my suitcase inside. Her apartment was modestly sized but welcoming, with colorful throw pillows and the scent of vanilla candles. You can't stay somewhere you're not respected. I barely slept that first night, replaying the confrontation in my mind, questioning if I had made the right decision. By morning, my phone was flooded with messages and missed calls from Derek. They started with anger. "How could you just leave like that?" Then shifted to manipulation. "My parents are really upset. They thought you cared about family." Finally, attempts at guilt. "I can't believe you would abandon our marriage without even trying to work things out." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called in sick to work and spent the day making appointments, with my bank to secure my accounts, with Jennifer Lawson to formally retain her as my divorce attorney, and with a therapist Amanda had recommended. Derek's calls continued throughout the day, growing increasingly desperate. Around noon, he called Amanda, who calmly confirmed I was safe but refused to give him any additional information. An hour later, he showed up at her apartment building, buzzing multiple apartments until someone let him in. Amanda and I watched through the peephole as he pounded on her door, demanding to speak with me. "Melanie, I know you're in there. This is childish. We need to talk about this like adults." Amanda called building security, and Derek was escorted out, shouting about his rights as my husband. The irony of his sudden concern for our marriage wasn't lost on me. By the third day, a new narrative had emerged. Through mutual friends, I learned that Harold and Geraldine were telling people I had abandoned the family during a difficult time, that I was selfish and materialistic, unable to understand the importance of supporting family in need. Some acquaintances believed them, sending me messages expressing disappointment in my behavior. What Derek and his family didn't know was that I had been methodically documenting everything for months. During my meeting with Jennifer, I provided her with detailed financial records, text messages, and journal entries chronicling the gradual takeover of my home and the deception regarding our finances. "This is excellent documentation," Jennifer said, reviewing the materials. "It clearly establishes a pattern of financial deception and emotional manipulation. Have you checked your credit report recently?" I hadn't, and when I did, I discovered Derek had opened a credit card in my name 3 months earlier. The card had a balance of nearly $7,000, with charges at electronics stores and gaming websites. Purchases for Paul, I realized with growing anger. Jennifer helped me file a fraud report and freeze my credit. We also drafted a formal separation agreement, outlining temporary financial arrangements while divorce proceedings moved forward. When Derek received the papers at his workplace a week after I left, he called immediately. Divorce? Are you serious? His voice was a mixture of shock and indignation. You're throwing away 7 years of marriage because my parents needed our help? No, Derek, I replied calmly. I'm ending our marriage because you lied to me. About your finances, about your parents staying temporarily, about everything. I never lied about loving you, he countered, his voice softening in a way I once found irresistible. Love without respect and honesty isn't love at all. It's control. He was silent for a moment. You installed a safe in our closet. Were you planning this all along? So they had found it. No. The safe was protection while I figured things out. Insurance against exactly what happened. What's that supposed to mean? It means I suspected you might choose your parents over me. I hoped I was wrong. The conversation ended with Derek vowing to fight the divorce, claiming I was overreacting to a simple family matter. But his bravado diminished considerably when Jennifer informed him that we had evidence of the fraudulent credit card and his years of financial deception. Through legal discovery, we uncovered even more. Derek and his family had been planning their move into our house for over a year. Emails between Derek and Harold discussed the strategy, present it as a temporary emergency, then gradually establish themselves as permanent residents. One particularly damning message from Harold read, "Once we're in, it'll be harder for her to ask us to leave without seeming heartless. We just need to be patient." They had also researched homeowner rights in cases of separation, specifically looking into whether Derek could legally exclude me from the property if I moved out voluntarily. They had been preparing for my eventual departure, seeing it not as a tragedy but as the final phase of their plan. The most shocking discovery was a draft lease agreement Derek had prepared, planning to rent rooms in our house to his parents and brother once I was gone. He would collect rent from them, turning our home into a source of income for himself. The document was dated 3 months before I left, proving he had anticipated, perhaps even engineered, the collapse of our marriage. When confronted with this evidence during a deposition, Derek's demeanor changed from righteous indignation to defensive stammering. His attorney requested a recess, and when they returned, Derek's approach had shifted entirely. He was now willing to negotiate. Throughout this period, I stayed with Amanda, gradually rebuilding my sense of self. Therapy helped me process the betrayal and recognize the subtle manipulation tactics that had made me doubt my own perceptions. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the months of isolation in my own home. I focused on my career, channeling my energy into a major project that eventually earned me a promotion. 3 months after our separation, Derek contacted me directly, bypassing our attorneys. He asked to meet for coffee, claiming he wanted to apologize in person. Against Jennifer's advice, I agreed, choosing a public cafe near my office. Derek looked different somehow, smaller without the backdrop of his family's approval. He explained that his parents and brother had moved out, unable to afford the mortgage payments without my income. They had found an apartment across town and were struggling to adjust to their reduced circumstances. I made a mistake, he admitted, staring into his coffee cup. I chose the wrong family. No, I corrected him gently. Your mistake was thinking you had to choose it all. A true partnership doesn't pit people against each other. He reached for my hand across the table. I withdrew it before he could touch me. Is there any chance for us? He asked, his voice breaking slightly. Now that they're gone, could we try again? I studied his face, searching for the man I had fallen in love with years ago. But that person was a construction, a carefully crafted image that had dissolved under pressure. The real Derek had revealed himself in his choices, his deceptions, his willingness to sacrifice my happiness for his family's comfort. "No," I said finally. "Some broken things can't be repaired. Trust is one of them." As I walked away from the cafe, I felt the last weight of my failed marriage lifting from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was mine to choose. 6 months after I walked out of my home in the middle of the night, the divorce proceedings were nearly complete. The court ordered our house to be sold, with the proceeds to be divided based on our contributions. Given my documented evidence of paying 75% of the down payment and mortgage, plus significant home improvements, I was awarded the majority share of the sale proceeds. Derek and his family were given 30 days to vacate the property. According to the real estate agent handling the sale, they left the house in disarray, with damage to several walls where furniture had been carelessly moved and stains on the carpets that required professional cleaning. Paul's room, once my office, needed extensive repairs where he had mounted gaming equipment directly into the walls without proper supports. The day before the house went on the market, I visited one last time to ensure all my remaining possessions had been removed. Walking through the empty rooms felt like visiting a museum of a previous life. In the master bedroom closet, I noticed the safe was gone, the wall patched somewhat clumsily where it had been installed. I smiled at the thought of them discovering the single document I had left inside, the evidence of their broken promises staring back at them. With the proceeds from the house sale and my savings, I purchased a smaller home in a neighborhood closer to my office. It was a cozy 2-bedroom bungalow with a garden in the back, perfect for one person with occasional guests. The first night in my new home, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, savoring the peace and quiet, the knowledge that every decision about this space was mine alone to make. My healing journey was neither quick nor linear. There were days when anger consumed me, when I replayed every lie and manipulation, questioning how I could have been so blind. There were nights when loneliness crept in, when I missed the comfort of sharing my life with someone, even if that connection had ultimately been built on deception. Therapy became my lifeline during this period. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, helped me work through the complex emotions of betrayal and loss. Grief after divorce isn't just about losing a partner, she explained during one session. It's about losing the future you thought you would have, the story you were telling yourself about your life. She encouraged me to reframe my experience not as a failure, but as growth. You've learned valuable lessons about boundaries, about trust, about your own resilience. These will serve you well moving forward. As part of my healing process, I started a support group for people who had experienced similar situations, financial deception and manipulation within marriages. We met twice monthly in a community center, sharing stories and strategies for rebuilding. What began as 4 people around a table grew to 15 regular attendees, each at different stages of their journey. Leading these sessions helped me articulate the lessons I had learned through my own experience. The importance of financial independence, even within a marriage. The necessity of clear boundaries with extended family. The warning signs of manipulation that I had ignored or rationalized away. Red flags look like regular flags when you're wearing rose-colored glasses, I often told newcomers to the group. Part of healing is learning to see clearly. Through the support group, I met Sophia, a divorce financial analyst who had left her husband after discovering he had gambled away their retirement savings. We connected over our shared background in finance and our experience with financial betrayal. She became a close friend and eventually introduced me to her brother, Marcus, who had gone through his own divorce years earlier. Marcus and I started as friends, meeting for coffee to discuss books or films, gradually sharing more personal stories. Unlike Derek, he listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and respected my boundaries without question. 6 months into our friendship, he asked if I would be interested in dating. I was hesitant, still healing from my marriage, but agreed to take things slowly. I'm not the same person I was before my divorce, I warned him during our first official date at a small Italian restaurant downtown. I'm more cautious now, more skeptical. I wouldn't expect anything else, he replied. Our experiences shape us. The question isn't whether we've been hurt, but what we've learned from the hurt. His understanding gave me space to build trust at my own pace. We continued dating casually for several months before I felt comfortable introducing him to my friends or discussing any kind of future together. He never pushed, never made me feel inadequate for needing time. Meanwhile, through mutual acquaintances, I occasionally heard updates about Derek and his family. They had moved to a neighboring city where Harold had connections. Derek had taken a job at a smaller company with a significant pay cut. Paul still lived with them, still unemployed. Geraldine had developed health problems that required ongoing care, adding to their financial strain. Derek attempted to contact me a few times, usually when he was facing some new difficulty. I maintained firm boundaries, responding only through my attorney when necessary. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning. A brief courthouse procedure that officially ended 7 years of marriage with the stroke of a pen. As I rebuilt my life, I reflected often on the lessons I had learned. The importance of trusting my instincts, even when others tried to convince me I was overreacting. The value of having my own financial security, separate from any relationship. The courage to walk away from a situation that was damaging my well-being, regardless of how others might judge that decision. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that resilience isn't about avoiding pain or preventing betrayal. It's about how you respond when those things inevitably occur. It's about gathering the broken pieces of what was and creating something new, something that better reflects who you've become through the experience. 1 year after leaving Derek, I hosted a housewarming party in my new home. Friends and colleagues filled the rooms with laughter and conversation. Amanda brought her new boyfriend. Marcus helped me serve drinks and seamlessly charmed everyone he met. As I looked around at this community I had built, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had led me here. Later that evening, when only Amanda and Marcus remained, helping me clean up, Amanda raised her glass in a toast. To Melanie, who lost a house but found a home. I smiled, thinking of the woman I had been a year earlier, packing a suitcase in the dark, terrified of an uncertain future. If I could speak to her now, I would tell her that the path ahead, though difficult, leads to a place of strength and authenticity she can't yet imagine. That the broken places, when healed, become the source of her greatest wisdom. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal? How did you find the strength to start over? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that there is life, and even joy, after devastation. Thank you for joining me on this journey of heartbreak and healing. Remember, sometimes the end of one chapter is just the beginning of a better story.